All right, we're on session number 39. Greetings to all our faithful watchers. I want to read one more quote out of this gem of a book by H.P. Blavatsky. It's 2 articles that she wrote in this book, Practical Occultism. And she's talking about aspirants. And at first she said, if you're not ready, don't worry about it. But don't try to take on something that you're not prepared for, because it requires all or nothing. And she continues, cities are only for those who are able to lead the life, to comply with the terrible sacrifices required for such a training, and to comply with them to the very letter. Let them know at once and remember always that true occultism, or theosophy, is the great renunciation of self, unconditionally and absolutely in thought as in action. It is altruism, and it throws him who practices it out of calculations of the ranks of the living altogether. And by that, she means the outer world. Not for himself, but for the world he lives, as soon as he has pledged himself to the work. Much is forgiven during the first years of probation, but no sooner is he accepted than his personality must disappear, and he has to become a mere beneficent force in nature. There are 2 poles for him after that, 2 paths, and no midway place of rest. He has either to ascend laboriously, step by step, often through numerous incarnations and no devachanic break, the golden ladder leading to Mahatmaship, the Arhat or Bodhisattva condition, or he will let himself slide down the ladder at the first false step and roll down into Dugpaship. So she mentions devachanic break, and guess what? That's exactly what we're going to talk about in our session today. All right, we finished 3 letters that were written to A.O. Hume, but were for both of the Englishmen. And it contained, all of them, especially the last 2, contained a lot of very heavy information, but very pertinent information. We've got now a new letter, number 68, which was addressed to Sinnett, even though he was still living in Shimla for the summer. For whatever reason, it was addressed specifically to Sinnett. And again, we have both the questions and the answers. So Sinnett wrote down several questions, 9 questions, and then KH answered each one. So again, I'm going to read the questions, and Paul's going to read KH's answers. This letter was received at Shimla sometime after July 15th, 1882.
Since the subject material of this letter is so different, do we know why that might be?
Yes, he explains it here.
Oh, okay, good.
All right. So the very first question that Sinnett wrote is, the remarks appended to a letter in the last Theosophist, which would have been the June 1882 edition, struck me as very important and as qualifying or perhaps contradicting a good deal of what we have hitherto been told regarding spiritualism. We had heard already of a spiritual condition of life in which the redeveloped ego enjoyed a conscious existence for a time before reincarnation in another world. But that branch of the subject has hitherto been glossed over. Now, some explicit statements are made about that in the article in the Devachan. I don't have it before me because I lent it to a friend, but if I remember correctly, that is the name given to the state of spiritual beatitude described. beatitude means sublime spiritual bliss. There, the new ego apparently retains complete recollection of his spiritual life on earth. Is that so, or is any part of my understanding incorrect?
Okay, I see. So we're shifting total gears from all of the
And yet,
previous material.
the other letters set the background because now that reincarnation is well established in the teachings, we want to know a little bit about how it actually works.
This would be zooming way in,
Yeah.
though, to an individual
Exactly.
life.
So all of that past explanation wasn't about the universe and it wasn't about our solar system. It was about our planetary system, but now we're focusing on individual lifetimes.
And the answer KH gives to this, he says, the Devachan, or land of Sukhavati, is allegorically described by our Lord Buddha himself in the Shanmun Yi Tung. Says Tathagata, and Tathagata was a wise Buddhist teacher in the past?
No. Tathagata is a term that refers to any Buddha, specifically to Gautama, but it also refers to a Buddha who is either on the verge of or has become a Dhyan Chohan, a very high form of Buddhahood.
This is what Buddha said in
But this time he's referring to Gautama.
many thousand myriads of systems of worlds beyond this, ours. There is a region of bliss called Sukhavati. Now that's interesting that he says many thousand myriads of systems of worlds beyond ours.
And what he means by that, I don't know.
Wow.
But when you listen to the description, it's very mystical, poetical, so don't get too bogged down. It's thrown out there as more for your imagination than anything else.
This region is encircled with 7 rows of railings, 7 rows of vast curtains, 7 rows of waving trees. This holy abode of Arhats is governed by the Tathagatas, or Dhyan Chohans, and is possessed by the Bodhisattvas. It has 7 precious lakes, in the midst of which flow crystalline waters having 7 and 1 properties, the 7 principles emanating from the One.
So when he says 7 and 1, it's again one principle, but emanating or showing up in 7 different ways.
Those born in the blessed region are truly felicitous. There is no more grief or sorrow in that cycle for them. Now, when he says born in that realm, let's not think that souls are being born there like we know about being born. It's arriving there after a death period, which we'll learn more about. It's arriving there, rather, or waking up there consciously. Myriads of spirits, or La, go there for rest and then return to their own regions, at least those who have not ended their earth rings. Just so our viewers can grasp this real quick, this is like a heaven world. I know we're going to get to that, but when we die, when our physical body dies, this is the period that we refer to as bardo, between life and death. And then he's saying those who go back to another body is reincarnation, unless we've achieved moksha or nirvana and finished our earth ring cycle of all the rounds, which is way in the future, just so we can grasp what he's saying. Many who are born in that land of joy are the Avaivartyas, those who will never return, the 7th round men. Wow, that's the first time we've heard of the 7th round men. Yeah, that's after nirvana. That's
The Dhyan Chohans.
But they have to come back and do work, though. They don't get to stay there.
Yeah, but remember, there's a big pralaya after the 7th one.
And they spend their pralaya in Devachan, or perhaps.
I don't know.
Okay.
But the point here he's making is that in Buddhism, there is something similar to what in other religions would be considered a heaven world.
We're using 2 words to describe this, Devachan and also Sukhavati. Those are referring to the same thing.
And we're taking the subject in the wrong order. As
Yeah.
we will find out, Davidtron is the last part
Right.
of the Bardo period.
There's more to
But
it.
because that was referred to in the Theosophist article, that he started from that part, and then we'll work backwards.
Okay, so now question
Now,
two.
question two, Seta asked, now, except for the fact that the duration of existence in the Davidtron is limited, there is a very close resemblance between that condition and the heaven of ordinary religions, excluding anthropomorphic ideas of God. And the answer?
Certainly, the new ego, once it is reborn, retains for a certain time proportionate to its earth life a complete recollection of his spiritual life on earth, but it can never return to earth from the Davidtron, nor has the latter, even excluding all anthropomorphic ideas of God, any resemblance to the paradise or heaven of any religion. And it is HPB's literary fantasy that suggests to her the wonderful comparison.
Poor HPB, they diss her quite often, but she's a good sport. She doesn't take offense at that. All right, Senate's third question.
Before we do that, when he says the ego, when it's reborn, now, is he talking about being born into Davidtron or being reborn into a physical body in the next reincarnation? I think he's talking about waking up in heaven, in Davidtron. That's what it sounds like he means to me.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And he's going to explain that a little more fully.
And he
that
says
there-
new ego. The word new doesn't really make sense.
It's a refined ego. It's not the same as the one that we think of as ego. It's a higher version of it.
And he says retains a recollection of his spiritual life on earth. That's an oxymoron. Spiritual life on earth.
But you'll find out very soon that it's not a recollection of the entire life on earth,
Just the aspects that are.
very high spiritually in nature.
That does make perfect sense now. Okay, number 3.
Number 3, now the question of importance is who goes to heaven or Davidtron? Is this condition only attained by the few who are very good or by the many who are not so very bad after the lapse in their case of a longer unconscious incubation or gestation period?
The answer, who goes to Davidtron? The personal ego, of course, but beatified, purified, holy, every ego, the combination of the 6th and 7th principles, which after the period of unconscious gestation is reborn into Davidtron, is of necessity as innocent and pure as a newborn babe.
All right, we have a new graphic here specifically for this.
Made by none other than Terry Vance.
I dream these up sometimes late at night. So, who goes to Davidtron? He says, first of all, the beatified, purified, the holy, the combination of the 6th and 7th principles.
But he says every ego, so every single human being does go.
Yes, but he's going to qualify that somewhat. So, the Atmic and the Buddhic portions of our being are what end up in Davidtron, but there's more.
And these are the 6th and 7th principles, the two
Yes.
highest aspects of our entire
So
being.
he's going to divide the principles a little bit differently than we have normally. And it's specifically for this. That shows us, too, that there isn't one set of 7. It has to be just like this. No. We see the general picture, and you can look at it from different
Yes.
angles, and you will see it differently.
And that's why a very common delineation of these is actually 5
Yes.
in the Vedantic system. 5, not 7.
So, yeah, once again, don't get hung up thinking it has to be this way. No, it doesn't. There are many different ways to see every aspect of it.
the fact of his being reborn at all there shows the preponderance of good over evil in his old personality. That's interesting. The preponderance of good over evil in everyone's.
So already he's qualifying this, saying that the ones who are born there have a preponderance of good in them. And we'll learn more as we go.
I'm taking that to mean that every ego goes there because everybody has a preponderance of good over evil.
We'll see. Let's keep going.
Okay. And while the karma of evil steps aside for the time being to follow him in his future earth reincarnation, yes, we knew it. We knew that happened. He brings along with him only the karma of his good deeds, words, and thoughts into this Devachan.
So karma is going to work out no matter what. It has to. But when the ego, the purified, beatified ego reaches Devachan, like a piece of luggage, your karma is left at the
Checked at the door.
at the door, yeah. And you don't take that crappy karma along with you. But when you get reborn again, guess what's waiting there for you?
The same bag.
The same bag of karma that you set down before. Exactly.
That's hilarious.
Can't get rid of it.
That's a really good analogy. He just came up with that right now. Quote, bad is a relative term for us, as you were told more than once before, and the law of retribution is the only law that never errs. Hence, all those who have not slipped down into the mire of unredeemable sin and brutality go to the Devachan. So that's the qualifier. Mm-hmm. All who have not slipped down into the mire of unredeemable sin and brutality. They will have to pay for their sins, voluntary and involuntary, later on. Meanwhile, they are rewarded and receive the effects of the causes produced by their good deeds, words, and thoughts. Wait, so is he contradicting himself?
Sort of.
Yeah, he is.
But we will learn later that it depends, too, on the quality. Maybe their period of Devachan is only a few hours.
Yeah. Versus a few thousand years.
He's going to give us an analogy of that.
Okay. Of course, it is a state, one of intense selfishness, during which an ego reaps the reward of his unselfishness on earth. Wow.
Yeah, that's very, very well put.
That is.
A state which is one of intense selfishness, during which the ego reaps the reward of his unselfishness on earth.
Wow.
And it is exactly that.
Wow. He is completely engrossed in the bliss of all his personal earthly affections, preferences, and thoughts, and gathers in the fruit of his meritorious actions. No pain, no grief, nor even the shadow of a sorrow comes to darken the bright horizon of his pure happiness, for it is a state of perpetual maya, which means illusion.
It's pure maya. It's a blissful dream, nothing more than that.
But it's a rest and a reward.
Yes, exactly. We all have dreams that are disturbing, might even be called nightmares sometimes, but we also have blissful dreams where you wake up and say, oh, I want to go back into that.
Since the conscious perception of one's personality on earth is but an evanescent dream, that sense will be equally that of a dream in the Devachan, only 100-fold intensified, so much so, in fact, that the happy ego is unable to see, through the veil, the evils, sorrows, and woes to which those it loved on earth may be subjected. So in other words, whoever is in this heaven world has no way to even be aware that anything challenging or tough or hurtful or painful is going on.
And they don't even remember any past events like that. All of that is wiped out for the time being.
Mm-hmm. And that also implies that we on earth can't contact them.
He's going to tell us.
That's interesting. I can't wait to hear that. It lives in that sweet dream with its loved ones, whether gone before or yet remaining on earth. And the reason for that is because it's all an illusion, really.
It is. It is a dream state.
Is that sad?
It's neither sad nor good. It is what it is.
It's almost like the Matrix. Like you get plugged into the system and you get fed a happy dream, and that's all you know.
We're going to see in another letter where the Englishman questioned this. Why would we even want that then if it's just an illusion?
Well, it's a rest. Okay. It has them near itself as happy, as blissful, and as innocent as the disembodied dreamer himself, meaning the loved ones. And yet, apart from rare visions, the denizens of our gross planet feel it not. It is in this, during such a condition of complete Maya, that the souls or astral egos of pure, loving sensitives, laboring under the same illusion, think their loved ones come down to them on earth, while it is their own spirits that are raised towards those in the Devachan.
So these spiritualist mediums who think that these people in the heaven world are coming down through them to visit with their loved ones are completely mistaken.
Many of the subjective spiritual communications, most of them when the sensitives are pure-minded, are real. But it is most difficult for the uninitiated medium to fix in his mind the true pictures of what he sees and hears. So again, I feel like he's contradicting himself. Many of the subjective spiritual communications, most of them when the sensitives are pure-minded, are real.
Yeah, he pretty much says later that regardless of how good these mediums are, they really don't see it accurately no matter what. They interpret it in their own way is what happens. They inject a filter in there that kind of modifies what the actuality is.
But he is saying that the sensitives raise their level up to Devachan? I thought that wasn't possible.
No, it would be very few. Maybe Anna Kingsford could get some glimpses of it, but I don't think even she was very accurate at interpreting what she saw.
So it is possible. He's saying it is possible, though, for a powerful sensitive of pure mind could enter that realm and communicate with.
It would have to be your higher self communicating with that higher self.
Interesting. Okay.
Question number 4, and he's referring back to his previous question about who is it that attains Devachan. Is it only the Arhat, or is it by all good people? He says, or are there great varieties of conditions within the limits of Devachan, so that an appropriate state is dropped into by all, from which they will be reborn into lower and higher conditions in the next world of causes, meaning the physical world. It's no use inventing hypotheses. We want some information to go on. He gets kind of demanding.
Wow. He's asking if there are great varieties of conditions. Appropriate state. Okay, I think I might know the answer, but...
Okay.
Yes, there are great varieties in the Devachan states. He's even using plural, states, Devachan states.
Right, because it's not just one state. It's a huge gamut.
And it is all as you say. There are as many shades of perception and ability to appreciate such a reward there as the many varieties of bliss on earth. It is an idealized paradise, in each case of the ego's own making, and by him filled with the scenery, crowded with incidents, and thronged with the people he would expect to find in such a sphere of compensative bliss. And it is that variety which guides the temporary personal ego into the current, which will lead him to be reborn in a lower or higher condition in the next world of causes. That would be another reincarnation.
Right.
Everything is so harmoniously adjusted in nature, especially in the subjective world, that no mistake can ever be committed by the Tathagatas or Dhyan Chohans who guide the impulses.
Now, remember, they are talking about worlds of causes and worlds of effects, or the results of those causes. Remember the first analogy many sessions ago of the rosary with white beads and black beads, white beads and black beads interspersed, when they referred to 7 objective worlds and 7 subjective worlds underneath those. That's again what they were referring to. So this condition of Devachan, and when we expand it, we'll include all of Bardo, is one of those worlds of effects. The causes have to be worked out to a degree in those worlds of effects, but the karma accumulated is different. So you could think of it, for example, as the energy accumulated during your lifetime, both good energy that accumulates and negative energy. That doesn't just disappear once your body dies. It has to, like a battery, be discharged. It has to go to neutral. The karma, though, that affected other people, that has to be lived out in other lifetimes.
Question number 5.
On the face of the idea, a purely spiritual state would only be enjoyable to the entities who are highly spiritualized in this life. But there are myriads of very good people, morally, who are not spiritualized at all. How can they be readied to pass from a material to a spiritual condition of existence? Now, keep in mind, in 1882, and even today, people think that you can't really be spiritual unless you're religious. To me, there is no connection. Some of the most unspiritual people I know are ultra-religious. So putting religion and morality or religion and spirituality as a team, I don't agree with that.
And the answer. It is a spiritual condition only as contrasted with our own grossly material condition. And as already stated, it is such degrees of spirituality that constitute and determine the great varieties of conditions within the limits of Devachan. A mother from a primitive tribe with her lost child in her arms is not any less happy than a mother from a regal palace. And although, as actual egos, children prematurely dying before the perfection of their septenary entity do not find their way to Devachan, yet all the same, the mother's loving fantasy finds all her children there, without one missing that her heart yearns for. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Children who die prematurely.
Yeah, they haven't really created any karma in 7 years.
Before the perfection of their septenary entity.
There is a change that takes place right around the 7-8 year mark of life where a person reaches the age of accountability.
Say it is but a dream, but after all, what is objective life itself except a panorama of vivid unrealities?
I love that. Say that again.
Wow. Say it is but a dream, but after all, what is objective life itself except a panorama of vivid unrealities?
And if that is the case, guess what? We get to create our own vivid unrealities. Yeah, some people live in a fantasy world and it is not very useful, but you can also determine how you see things. If you see people out there as being obstacles that they are constantly throwing difficulties in front of you, that's one way to look at it. Or you could look at every single person that you encounter, whether it's a pleasant encounter or a negative one, as a teacher. How did I react to that situation? Did I treat them as a human being, as part of my family? Or did I look at them as something apart from me and something to hate? We get to choose how we look at things. And so that's part of this unreality. But let's make it a positive, not a negative way of looking at it.
The pleasures realized by an American Indian in his happy hunting grounds in that land of dreams is not less intense than the ecstasy felt by a connoisseur who passes eons in the rapturous delight of listening to divine symphonies by imaginary angelic choirs and orchestras. As it is no fault of the former, if a born savage with an instinct to kill, though it caused the death of many an innocent animal, why, if he was a loving father, son, husband, why should he not also enjoy his share of reward? The case would be quite different if the same cruel acts had been done by an educated and civilized person from a mere love of sport, which happens all the time.
Yeah, the savage is killing animals for food. And besides that, they see those animals as spiritual creatures. And they themselves, in their innocence, because they aren't filled with all of the desires that we more advanced people have, are often far more spiritual than we are. And on the other hand, in 1882, fox hunting was still a great sport. Oh, let's go get up in our outfits and take our dogs along and let's go kill some foxes. Just for fun, Spend an afternoon just having some
It's
fun.
more appropriate for the Native American. It's
Yeah,
less
exactly.
appropriate for the modern day. Yeah.
And the karma is completely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Killing
intention.
living things just for fun engenders quite a different karma from killing an animal for food for your family.
The savage, in being reborn, would simply take a low place in the scale by reason of his imperfect moral development, while the karma of the other would be tainted with moral failure. Just said much more eloquently than we said it.
From him to whom much is given, much is required. The more advanced you are, the more responsible you are for your actions.
Very, very true. And it's also our duty to know. If we're negligent in our gifts, that's almost worse.
Yes, it is. Our karma increases as we
Yes.
gain knowledge and ability to see things.
Yes. Everyone but that ego which, attracted by its gross magnetism, falls into the current that will draw it to the planet of death.
Keep that thought in mind, the planet of death.
The mental as well as physical satellite of our earth is fit to pass into a relative spiritual condition adjusted to his previous condition in life and mode of thought.
This is very interesting. He says this planet of death is the mental as well as physical satellite of our Earth. Can you think of it a physical satellite?
The moon.
Okay, let's keep that in mind.
Okay. To my knowledge, HPB explained to Mr. Hume that man's sixth principle, as something purely spiritual, could not exist or have conscious being in the Devachan unless it assimilated some of the more abstract and purer of the mental attributes of the fifth principle, or animal soul, its manas, or mind, and memory.
Let's go back to our graphic here. And so he's saying, yes, it is the Atmic and Buddhic levels of man's existence that goes into Devachan, but that it would be meaningless unless it also includes the upper part of the mental being. So as you notice in this, we use this background specifically because every one of these levels of consciousness has a great gradation, variation in qualities from the lowest to the highest. So it has to incorporate the higher qualities of the mental plane, what we would call the higher manas.
They interpenetrate, in other words. They
Right.
include aspects of each other.
And that's why he is using a little bit different system of expressing these for Devachan.
When man dies, his second and third principles die with him. So second and third,
Now, he's talking about the physical. When the physical body dies, the etheric double also dies, and the jiva, the prana, that all disappears within hours after a person dies. And then at that point, what's left is four principles: the astral, mental, Buddhic, and Atmic,
now are you referring to jiva as...
as prana.
I've heard the word jiva be used to refer to the...
It can.
Soul.
It has more than one meaning.
Okay.
But sometimes it's used as prana.
Okay.
But it means that spiritual force which makes us a living being in our physical body.
But it's very simple to understand how when we die, the physical, your prana, or the etheric double, and the lower mind and emotions will dissipate and die.
Not the lower mind, because we still haven't got to the Kamaloka.
Oh, okay. Well, eventually it'll dissipate, but
Yeah.
right now when we... Okay.
At death, those three aspects of our being die. And that's what we're left with, starting with the astral on up. As we said earlier, He started with the Devachan, which was probably the wrong way, but it was because Sinnett had asked questions regarding an article in the Theosophist.
David Chan comes later in the process, but
Right.
we'll make sense of it all.
Will make sense.
The lower triad disappears, and the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh principles form the surviving quaternary.
All right. So the top four. Now we're talking about a higher quaternary, which normally we talk about a lower quaternary, but this is different.
Does he separate the etheric double and prana?
He does, yes. So one is kind of the blueprint for the physical body, and the other is the life force.
I've always been under the impression that the prana is the blueprint, but maybe they are separate.
As we've said, there are many different ways to look at this, and they use different terms in different places. So, again, we have to use our intuition more than our
Yes.
brain.
And different schools and traditions name them different
They
things
do.
and combine certain ones. And after that, meaning after the lower triad disappears and the fourth, fifth, sixth, and seventh principles survive, it is a death struggle between the upper and lower dualities.
There are, in this quaternary, two dualities. The upper is Atma and Buddha, and the lower is the mental realm and the astral, or the mental principle and the astral principle. So there's a struggle. Now, he kind of makes it sound like this is a big struggle in every single death, but the fact is there's one outcome that almost always happens.
If the upper wins, the sixth, having attracted to itself the quintessence of good from the fifth, its nobler affections, its saintly, even if earthly, aspirations, and the most spiritualized portions of its mind, follows its divine elder, the seventh, into the gestation state of Devachan, and the fifth and fourth remain in association as an empty shell to roam in the earth's atmosphere, with half the personal memory gone and the more brutal instincts fully alive for a certain period, and elementary, in short.
So, in other words, definitely not the real individual. It's a fragment of what the person used to be.
He's making it sound like the lower two are operating in Kamaloka at the same time that Devachan is occurring, but it's not that.
No, he's still talking about the process of going from the Kamaloka to Devachan.
Oh.
This is the first time he's mentioned it.
So he is going in reverse order then.
Yes.
Let's be clear, this is not a chronological order of what happens after death.
No.
The body has died. This process of Kamaloka hasn't been mentioned yet, but that has already happened. And now we're talking about going into Devachan.
So first he describes Devachan.
Yeah.
Then he describes the process by which the transition takes place.
Getting into Devachan.
Right.
From
And then later he's going to go
Yeah.
even farther back.
Okay.
But as we pointed out in the beginning, this whole process of Devachan makes no sense unless it takes with it the higher qualities. And generally that would be the top three principles of the mental being
Should
of
we
that
give
person.
just a very short overview of the process of Kamaloka, just so we have the whole thing in chronological order, just real quick, or not?
Let's just say that Kamaloka would involve the rest of that. So all of the astral and the lower part of the mental. And as HPB pointed out in one of her statements in her book, Practical Occultism, nothing can ever dissipate immediately. An accumulated energy has to be worked out too, not just our karma, but also the energy that we accumulate. So during life, we have astral energy, emotional energy that accumulates, and we have spiritual energy that accumulates. And neither one can just disappear. It doesn't happen that way. So let's continue from there.
This is the angel guide of the average spiritualist medium. He's referring to the lower aspects, the fourth and
Right.
fifth.
So when they communicate with your dead relative, they are communicating with what's left over here. It's the astral, the emotional part, and the lower part of the mental. So there are some memories. That's why they can appear as if that is your relative. But anyone who is very perceptive will realize that doesn't quite look right. There's no life in it.
Let's hear again what he says about that. It's the fourth and fifth principles, meaning the astral and mental, like Terry just said, remain together in association as an empty shell to roam in the Earth's atmosphere, with half of the personal memory gone and the more brutal instincts fully alive for a certain period. So that's what's being contacted by spiritualists, not the real person.
Once they go into Devachan, there's nothing at all for them to contact except the shell. And it's not real. It's just cast off remnants. There is no part of the actual ego of that person that is animating it. It's an elemental that chooses to animate it.
And this is the angel guide of the, in quotes, of the average spiritualist medium. If, on the other hand, it is the upper duality which is defeated in this death struggle and the lower portion wins, then it is the fifth principle that assimilates all that there may be left of personal recollection and perceptions of its personal individuality in the sixth. But with all this additional stock, it will not remain in Kamaloka, the world of desires, or our Earth's atmosphere. In a very short time, like a straw floating within the attraction of the vortices of the maelstrom, it is caught up and drawn into the great whirlpool of human egos, while the sixth and seventh, now a purely spiritual individual monad with nothing left in it of the late personality, having no regular gestation period to pass through, since there is no purified personal ego to be reborn after a more or less prolonged period of unconscious rest in the boundless space, will find itself reborn in another personality on the next planet. Whoa.
Okay,
That's
now,
an extremely rare phenomenon, though. It's interesting, but let's not focus too much on that, right? Because that rarely happens.
Talking about a black magician who sold his soul for eternal life, as he thinks it is. But what he did actually was he captured his lower soul. His higher soul he can never capture. So what happens in that case is that the Atmic and Buddhic levels have nothing to go with them. They're pure spiritual aspects of manifestation.
They've been separated, basically.
Exactly. So it's like a complete cut.
Instead of eternal life, he's lost his true soul.
Exactly. But it's a Mayic eternal life because he can live until the next planet. Actually, he, as a personality, will eventually die and nothing will exist of that. So that's the fate of a real black magician who has gone far enough.
When the period of full individual consciousness, which precedes that of absolute consciousness, in the pari-nirvana, arrives, this lost personal life becomes as a torn-out page in the great book of lives. There's the torn-out page that we've read before.
Yes.
Without even a disconnected word left to mark its absence.
So that personality just is wiped out. And the material is still there. It will be recycled, will be reused. But as a personal memory, it's gone. That person, even though they had lived a number of lifetimes, all of those lifetimes disappeared.
I wonder if there's any karma still.
I don't think so.
It's completely...
Because I think they live out their karma in whatever length of time that being exists. And remember, as Damodar said, it could be as much as 1,000,000 years.
Even though it will result in a torn-out page.
Yes, because his lower consciousness is still there.
Wow.
He doesn't have a physical body. All he has is his astral desires and lusts, and trying to figure out a way to satisfy those. But as a spiritual being, he gave that up.
I wonder how it ends up dissipating, though, because if there is a semblance of consciousness, it's not going to dissipate.
No, and we're going to learn a little bit more. It has to do with this planet of death.
Oh my gosh. The purified monad will neither perceive nor remember it in the series of its past rebirths, which it would have if it had gone to the world of forms, rupa loka. That's the incarnation into manifestation, right?
No, Devachan has two different levels. There's a rupa and an arupa, one with form and one without
Oh,
form.
wow, okay. So the world of forms refers to the lower stage of Devachan, and its retrospective glance will not perceive even the slightest sign to indicate that it had existed. Wow, so it really is just a torn out page with no evidence
Yeah.
left. Wow. To the credit of mankind, I must say that such an utter obliteration of an existence from the tablets of universal being does not occur often enough to make a great percentage. In fact, such a thing is an exception to the rule. Thank goodness. My gosh, that's
Yes.
sad.
This has to be a very intelligent individual to do this, to make it happen. There are plenty of black magicians, gray magicians who cast spells and try to manipulate people who don't go anywhere near this far. It has to be someone who really could have the potential to become a Mahatma, on the verge of learning what would be necessary for that, and yet they turn the opposite direction and try to satisfy their lust and ambition, personal ambition, with the powers that they have accumulated.
And then there's a number 6 here.
All right, number 6, the question by Sinnett was, and how is a spiritual existence in which everything has merged into the 6th principle compatible with that consciousness of individual and personal material life which must be attributed to the ego in Devachan if he retains his earthly consciousness as stated in the Theosophist note?
The question is now sufficiently explained, I believe. The 6th and 7th principles, apart from the rest, constitute the eternal, imperishable, but also unconscious monad. To awaken in it the latent consciousness, especially that of personal individuality, requires the monad plus the highest attributes of the 5th, the animal soul. And it is that which makes the ethereal ego that lives and enjoys bliss in the Devachan. Spirit, the unalloyed emanation of the One, forms the highest triad, along with the 7th and 6th principles, and neither of the two emanations is capable of assimilating anything except that which is good, pure, and holy. That makes sense.
So on their own, they are already pure and holy. There's nothing to be purified. But their only purpose is to bring what it can of the purified personal experience of that individual.
Thus, no sensual, material, or unholy recollection can follow the purified memory of the ego to the region of bliss. That's cool. The karma for these recollections of evil deeds and thought will reach the ego when it changes its personality in the following world of causes. The monad, or the spiritual individuality, remains untainted in all cases. No sorrow or pain for those born there in the rupa loka, or of Devachan, for this is the pure land.
Question number 7. The period of gestation between death and Devachan has hitherto been conceived by me as very long. It is said to be in some cases only a few days, but in no case is it implied. Is it more than a few years? This seems plainly stated, but I ask if it can be explicitly confirmed, because it is a point on which so much depends. And he's got this a little muddled.
So he's asking about the period of times once the body dies, between that time and entering into Devachan. 7. The answer. Another fine example of the habitual disorder in which Mrs. Blavatsky's mental furniture is kept. Oh my gosh. She talks of Bardo, and now Bardo again is the entire period from the death of a personality to the next rebirth in the physical.
And that's what he's going to explain. She didn't really explain that.
And does not even say to her readers what it means. As in her writing room confusion reigns, so in her mind crowded ideas are piled in such a chaos that when she wants to express them, the tail peeps out before the head. Well, he's one to talk. He's talking about the opposite order
He does,
also.
exactly. But she was not a tidy person, even in her personal life. Her room was a mess,
Yeah.
almost always. Stuff piled everywhere. And even, in fact, at one point, one of the Mahatmas, I believe it was Maurya, wrote a note to Alcott and said, "Could you please tidy up HPB's room? I have business to conduct there later today, and I would smother if I had to go into that atmosphere."
Bardo has nothing to do with the duration of time in the case you are referring to. Bardo is the period between death and rebirth and may last from a few years to a kalpa.
And there are different kalpas, just like there are different pralayas. It can be thousands of years, it can be millions of years, and even longer.
Wow. It is divided into 3 sub-periods. When the ego, delivered of its mortal coil, enters into kama loka, the abode of elementaries. So let's define what that means, right? So being freed of the mortal coil means body,
The physical body and the 2 other lower principles with it.
The astral consciousness with the mental consciousness enters into kama loka, is what he's saying.
Well, yes, they do. Right.
That's what he's saying for the first stage.
Right.
The abode of elementaries. And that's why when spiritualist mediums contact a person, it's that shell of astral and lower mental vehicles animated by the elementary entities. And in the second phase of Bardo, when the person enters into its gestation state, and we can say that's kind of a rest, a falling asleep.
Yes, but it's analogous to the period when an embryo is gestating in the womb. It's kind of a chrysalis. So what existed before creates this cocoon, goes into a long slumber, and is transformed in the process.
In John Algio's book, he refers to it, maybe correctly, maybe incorrectly, as falling asleep, which is, it's more than that. It's gestating. It's like hibernation.
Right, yeah.
Algio also says that that happens right after death, before Kamaloka.
No.
He does say that. He says that.
I know, but it is a state after Kamaloka. So that's what KH is saying. There are 3 periods.
So when a person dies, we don't initially go unconscious. It's immediately Kamaloka, you're saying.
Every one of these has phases, and the first is unconsciousness. Just like when you go to sleep at night, you're unconscious generally for a while. Then you slowly wake up into this dream world.
Which we are referring to as Kamaloka.
Right. So using the analogy of going to sleep at night and the analogy of death, it works very much in the same way.
Then after Kamaloka, this is the second going to sleep, which we're calling a gestation state or a chrysalis or a hibernation. Then the third state, when the person is reborn, he's saying, or wakes up, we can also say, in the lower stage of Devachan, which is called Rupa Loka, or the world of form. And then it looks like he's dividing that into, no, he's going back to number 1.
Yes.
Okay. Rupa Loka of Devachan. Sub-period 1, which we're calling Kamaloka, may last from a few minutes to a number of years. The phrase a few years becomes puzzling and utterly worthless without a more complete explanation. Sub-period 2, the gestation state, is, quote, very long, as you say, longer sometimes than you may even imagine, yet proportionate to the ego's spiritual stamina. Wow. Sub-period 3, Devachan, lasts in proportion to the good karma, after which the monad is again reincarnated. So he's summarizing the whole process of Bardo. And ego is carried where? To Devachan or to the second?
Go ahead and finish that, and then we'll talk about it.
It leaves a world of bliss to be reborn in a world of causes.
Meaning in the physical realm again. So after we die, we go into a state of unconsciousness. Gradually, we wake up in Kamaloka and have our experience there that goes through various levels of consciousness and awareness. Once all of our emotional energy is exhausted that we accumulated during our lifetime, it tapers off until we again fall into an unconscious phase. Then there's this gestation phase, which can last a short time or a very long time. because also it depends on the amount of good karma that we have accumulated.
We're still unconscious at that period.
During the gestation period, there's no real consciousness to speak of. Then when we do awaken in Devachan, again, it's a slow awakening. And this is our state of bliss, our heaven world that we experience for some people, very, very long period of time, and for others, a very short period, as KH is going to explain. Then, whenever that energy is dissipated, again, we drift off into an unconscious sleep, and then we wait until all of the conditions are right for our next appearance on Earth.
Our next appearance. Showtime.
Yeah.
The curtain raises.
That's exactly what it is.
That's funny.
All right. Number 8, if that is true, and I'm not quite sure what he's referring to, and assuming that Devachan is not solely the inheritance of adepts in persons almost as elevated, there is a condition of existence tantamount to heaven actually going on, from which the life of earth may be watched by an immense number of those who have gone before. Now, it makes it sound like those in Devachan can watch, and Sinnett is speculating that those inhabitants of Devachan can watch what's going on Earth. Now, he combined another question with this, number 9. He said, and for how long does this state of spiritual beatitude endure? For years, for decades, for centuries?
Most emphatically, the Devachan is not solely the heritage of adepts. And most decidedly, there is a heaven. If you must use this astro-geographical Christian term for an immense number of those who have gone before. But the life of earth can be watched by none of these for reasons of the law of bliss, plus Maya already given. They're not compatible.
Yes, and he's going to explain this more later. It wouldn't be a state of bliss if they were aware of all of our messes and our aggravations and problems going on here.
And this is the answer to number 9 now, which was
where he was asking about the duration. How long does this last?
For years, decades, centuries, and millenniums, often multiplied by something more. Jeez. It all depends on the duration of karma. Fill Den's little cup with oil and a city reservoir as well, and lighting both, see which one burns longer. The ego is the wick, and karma is the oil.
Now,
wow.
Den, or Denny as he's usually called, is his little 4-year-old son, so obviously had a little cup appropriate for a child. So he's comparing the amount of oil you could put in a small cup at a city reservoir, water reservoir, fill them both with oil, put a wick in each one, and then light them and see which one burns longer.
The difference in time for the cup and the reservoir to empty will suggest to you the great difference in duration of various karmas. Aha.
Aha.
Every effect must be proportionate to the cause. The good thoughts, words, and deeds of any one of these lives on a globe are causative of effects, the working out of which requires far more time than the evolution of the causes occupied. But we need to say something about that, because he's not talking about resolving karma.
No.
He's not talking about clearing the causes. It's a rest in proportion to the good deeds that you did. You get more time to rest and to experience bliss. It's a reward. It's not working out of the karma. Just like Kamaloka isn't a place to resolve the naughty things that you did. It's a repercussion of all the unresolved energy that you created. It's not resolving the deeds.
Exactly. And keep in mind that, except in rare instances, we can only create karma while we're in the physical body with all of our faculties in place.
Unless we're black magicians when we don't have a body anymore and we meddle with the physical world and we don't have bodies.
And he will introduce a couple of other instances too, which are anomalies.
Therefore, when you read in the fabulous stories of the Buddhist scriptures that this or that good action was rewarded by very long kalpas of bliss. Do not smile at the absurd exaggeration, but bear in mind what I have said. From a small seed sprang a tree whose life endures now for 22 centuries. I mean the Anuradhapura Bo tree.
Do you know what that is?
No.
Someone 2,200 years ago took a sapling from the tree under which Buddha attained enlightenment,
The Bodhi tree.
the Bodhi tree.
Oh, that's what he means by Bo? Bodhi?
Right,
Oh,
I
he's
guess,
shortening
I'm
it.
assuming. So someone took a graft from that and transported it to Sri Lanka and planted it. And that tree was still alive 2,200 years later.
Nor must you laugh if ever you come across Pinda Dahana or any other Buddhist sutra and read, quote, between the Kamaloka and the Rupa Loka of the Devachan state, there is a locality, the dwelling of Mara, death. Huh, whoa. This Mara, filled with passion and lust, destroys all virtuous principles as a stone grinds corn.
Very finely, apparently.
Between Kamaloka and the Devachanic state, there's a locality, the dwelling of Mara. Oh my gosh, I didn't know
And
that.
yeah, he'll explain a little bit more about that.
Wow. This Mara is the allegorical image of the sphere called the planet of death, the whirlpool where the lives doomed to destruction disappear. It is between the Kamaloka and Rupa Loka that the struggle takes place. There are Rupa Devas and Arupa Devas, which would be what, angels and...
Deva is angels and higher elementals. And Rupa means with form, Arupa without form.
The form or objective and the formless or subjective Tian Chohans. And the same is true for the class of men, since there are shells and Mara Rupas, that is, bodies doomed to annihilation.
The term Deva covers a large gamut of beings, from those who are only slightly higher, they're actually higher forms of elementals, all the way up to Dhyan Chohans. So it's huge, the range. Whereas for humans, we have a very limited range. We have different, very distinct steps that we go through. Human, and then superhuman, which is the Mahatmas or Arhats, the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas, and then the Dhyan Chohans. They have their own ranges too, but different terms for each one.
Before we get bogged down in more details, it's very interesting, but I want to make sure I understand what we're talking about here. He's talking about between the stage of Kamaloka, which is the resolving of emotional energy after death, and Devachan. There's a location where death dwells.
He's talking again about the black magicians who have acquired so much power that they used it to basically separate themselves from their higher nature.
So most people aren't involved in this.
No.
Okay. He says it's the allegorical image of the sphere called the planet of death, the whirlpool where the lives doomed to destruction disappear. So
Right.
the lives doomed to destruction are the naughty people who are their process of evolution is done
It's
for this
done.
cycle of
And
for this
again,
round.
it could last for thousands and thousands of years. So these are the beings that one could encounter and does encounter during this after-death state of Bardo, beginning with Kamaloka at the very lowest, and then the Devachan as far as the higher beings, and he will go kind of from top to bottom.
But he's talking specifically in the planet of death, though.
I think what he's saying is that there are also, among the beings that can be encountered, those same beings that are doomed to destruction. And he will later, in a different letter, imply that it's only at certain periods of time when they can leave their planet of death and interact with people on Earth.
Oh, wow. So there are 7. And the first, number 1, is Rupa Devas. But the Rupa Devas are not Dhyan Chohans.
They can be. So, in other words, they can have a form. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's physical. It can be. Dian Chohans can take on a physical form anytime they choose to,
Okay.
either a semi-permanent one or a temporary one.
Number 2, Arupa Devas, Dian Chohans having no form.
And so these are the same beings, Dian Chohans, but he's separating how they appear, how they interact with others. And he mentions in both cases they are ex-men. In other words, you cannot become a Dian Chohan of any status without having passed at some point through the human kingdom.
3, Pisachas, 2 principled ghosts.
And Pisacha is the Sanskrit term for ghost. The Hindus avoid them at all costs. Most of them do. Some people use them for magic purposes.
We can use the chart that Terry made as well to reference the 2 principles referred to. Pisachas, 2 principled ghosts. Which one do you think they are? Which 2 principles are they? A, these 2 principles. B, these 2 principles. C, these 2 principles. Ding, 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 ding.
Ding, ding, ding. Yeah, it's the very lowest of those.
But then we have Mara Rupas. This is number 4. Doomed to death. 3 principled. Now, the naughty people who are being sent to the planet of death to disappear, which 3 principles would that be referring to? Now, to our listeners, remember, it's the people who have ripped their lower nature away from their soul in the pursuit of trying to achieve eternal life. But really, it's not their true self they've saved, it's their lower nature. So which 3 principles are we talking about there? Prana, astral, and mental? Because it wouldn't be...
It wouldn't be prana, but it would be the astral, the lower mental, and the higher mental. Because remember, if you go to Devachan, it's Atma, Buddhi, and the higher part of the mental.
So remember as well that the mental level is divided into 2 sub-levels. The lower mind, which deals with facts and data and concrete thinking, and the higher mind, which is arupa in form.
But in the case of the Black Magician, they captured even that part, the highest part of your personality.
And KH is referring to the higher state and the lower state as 2 individual principles.
Right.
That's why he's saying
Exactly.
3 principles. And then the 5th type of being, Asuras, or elementals, having human form. Interesting how they would have human form, but they're not humans yet. They will be moving through the human kingdom in the future.
Yes,
Elementals.
but remember, any astral being can manifest however they want. And we'll see what the next category is.
Beasts, number 6. Beasts are elementals of the 2nd class, animal elementals, who will also eventually be humans in a future round or chain process.
In a future chain, because they haven't even gone through the actual animal kingdom yet. They can manifest as animals.
But they haven't become physical yet. They're still elementals.
Let's go back to number 5, Asura. Sura is a spiritual being. Asura is the opposite of that. It's the underside, 2 sides of a coin. The top being the spiritual part, the bottom side being the underground, the demonic part of that. Sura is the spiritual, Asura is the negative condition of that.
And then number 6 were beasts.
Beasts. So again, any of these elementals can manifest however they choose to. Many of them manifest as humans. He's going to talk later in this letter, which we won't get to today, about astral beings who appear to people to tempt them sometime. Remember the letter where KH was explaining to Sinnett the visions that Satan Moses was having for a long period of time, where he was beside himself because he was being tested to become a chela. And it was awful. HPB actually begged the Mahatmas to let him not have to go through that. And they said he has to be tested. And it was, in his mind, awful. It's basically these beings tempting him in sexual ways and in many other ways. This same story is actually presented in the Bible, in the New Testament, the temptation of Jesus in the wilderness. The Bible, especially the New Testament, really does have some really good information in it if anyone was able to translate it better or to give us the analysis better. Esoteric Christianity is perfectly reliable as far as this goes, but no one has come up with a set of doctrine based on that that is really helpful in our everyday life. So in the New Testament, Jesus, after he was baptized, meaning spiritually reborn, baptism is a symbol for rebirth. He was spiritually reborn, but then he had to be tempted. So he went out in the desert for 40 days for this period of temptation. And the tempter was the devil. And he was fasting this whole time for 40 days.
Wow.
Now, obviously, this is an allegory. And so one of the things the devil said was, if you're the Son of God, if you really are as high spiritually as you say you are, turn these stones into bread so you can eat them. And Jesus didn't fall for that. He said, get away from here. And so then he took him up to a very high place and said, I will give you dominion over all of this land if you will renounce God. He said, you will be the most powerful man on earth. And again, he turned him down. So then he took him up to the very highest part of the temple in Jerusalem and said, if you are the Son of God, cast yourself down, because is it not written in the Bible, and he shall give his angels charge concerning thee, to keep thee, to bear thee up, lest at any time thou dash thy foot against a stone? And then Jesus had had enough, and he said, get thee behind me, Satan. Get out of here. Yes, everyone who is that far along on the path does have to go through these temptations, and they come almost entirely during the dream state. And they can be in the form of sexual temptations. Individuals say, ooh, let's get it on. Or it can be these beasts, for example, to see if you're fearful. And they can appear as ferocious, gigantic beasts that are about to devour you. Are you going to panic? Or are you going to recognize that it is an illusion, that it can't hurt you? Another one is actually dreaming that you're on a cliff and that you're about to fall, or that you do fall. And again, do you panic? Do you wake up in a panic? Or do you say, it's only a dream, it can't hurt me? Watch yourself just slowly descend. So these are temptations that actually happen, and these elementals are the method through which we are tempted. All right, there you go.
We have a seventh being, Rakshasas, or demons. Souls or astral forms of sorcerers. Men who have reached the apex of knowledge in the forbidden art. Dead or alive, they have, so to say, cheated nature, but it is only temporary until our planet goes into obscuration, after which they have to be annihilated.
Now, I think this is most likely the case with Murad Ali Beg. Remember that he contacted some being on the astral plane that helped him to achieve his goal of making this woman fall in love with him. I think that's what he's talking about here. Now, KH puts a note here on the first of those, which is about the Dian Chohans, and he says, "The planetary spirits of our Earth are not of the highest, as you may well imagine." And it is true, our humanity is not among the most advanced of human evolutions on many different planets around the galaxy or even around the universe. We're kind of a mediocre one. And that means in the next evolution, our humanity will be higher still. It keeps going up, up, up. So not all human evolutions in different solar systems are equal. That's why the Dian Chohans, when they travel intergalactic space, interstellar space, they can visit different civilizations, ones that are much lower than ours, ones that are much higher than ours. And they can see what they are going to have to learn to conduct our humanity from the human realm to the adept arhat level and on from there. It's an entire educational process, everything, all of it. There's nothing in life that is not educational and raising our consciousness, our awareness, and our usefulness in the plan of developing awareness, of enlightenment.
Last paragraph says, "It is these 7 groups that form the principal divisions of the dwellers of the subjective world around us. It is in stock number 1 that are the intelligent rulers of this world of matter," which would be the Dian Chohans, "and who, with all this intelligence, are but the blindly obedient instruments of the One, the active agents of a passive principle."
Yes, the Dian Chohans are the architects, the builders of our world. We're only partway through here. We're more than halfway through this letter number 68, but it is an extremely interesting and extremely important letter. Understanding this is going to answer a lot of questions about what happens after death. And we'll be able, after we get the rest of the letter under our belts, to figure out some of the things that have bothered me and other people for centuries about what does happen. And it's important because we have loved ones who have died and we would like to know what happened to them. And we're going to die too at some point. So we want to know what happens to us as well. So stay tuned next week for session number 40, and we'll answer some more of these very interesting, profound questions.
All right. Namaste.